Namaste, welcome back. Let's start discussing the 36th lecture of a lecture series on Indigenous Knowledge System from the Earth for the Future. This is Dr. Ajit Jaswal, Head Department of Anthropology. Today I will discuss on Indigenous Knowledge System and its contribution to biodiversity conservation. If you remember in the last class or in the previous lecture, we discussed about indigenous knowledge system and its contribution to healthcare. In that, we discussed about series of important factors like agroecological practices, traditional crop varieties, seed saving and exchange, water harvesting technique, traditional knowledge and plant medicine, and cultural practices and rituals. These are the points that we discussed in the last class. That was really a very important and highly proliferating one. If you have missed, then you can see the link given over here. There are series of lectures that we discuss. Up till now, we have completed 35 lecture of a lecture series on indigenous knowledge system from the earth for the future. So let's start the 36th one, that is indigenous knowledge system and its contribution to biodiversity conservation. Today, I will try to cover the important areas or the key contributing factor like traditional ecological knowledge, sustainable resource management practices, community-based conservation initiative, sacred groves and traditional protected areas, seed sovereignty and crop diversity, ecosystem restoration and regeneration, and legal recognitions of inputs right. So these are the important areas that we try to discuss in the context of contribution to biodiversity conservation. Let's start discussing about indigenous knowledge systems. As I already told you, it had made significant contribution to biodiversity conservation through traditional ecological knowledge, through steward practices, through cultural values that promote harmonious relationship between human and the natural world. Now let's try to see the series of contributing factors or contributions of indigenous knowledge system to biodiversity conservation. Like as I told you, there are series of factors. Let's start discussing one by one. You remember, as I told you earlier also, there are series of factors that play a very important role. And when we talk about Bharatiya Gyan Parampara, when we talk about indigenous knowledge system, when we talk about specific rights, specific value of our own indigenous system, we have to think in that manner. And this is the example of that only. Now let's discuss one by one. First one is traditional ecological knowledge. So indigenous communities possess rich traditional ecological knowledge about local ecosystem, about biodiversity and natural resources accumulated over generation through observation, through experimentation and through oral transmission. This knowledge encompasses a detailed understanding of plant and animal species, their habitat, their lifestyles and ecological interaction as well as seasonal pattern, weather forecasting and landscape dynamics. Next point is sustainable resource management practices. Indigenous people have developed a sustainable resource management practices that maintain ecological balance, enhance biodiversity, and support the long-term viability of ecosystem. This practice include rational grazing, controlled burning, selective harvesting, and rotational cropping, which mimic natural economic or ecological processes and promote resilience to environmental changes. Third important point is community-based conservation initiative. Indigenous community often play a central role in conserving biodiversity through community-based conservation initiatives that integrate traditional knowledge with modern conservation approaches. Indigenous-led conservation efforts focus on promoting or protecting sacred sites, biodiversity hotspot, and cultural landscape, as well as establishing community-managed protected areas, indigenous reserves, and biocultural heritage territories. The fourth important point is sacred group and traditional protected area. Indigenous culture around the world has established sacred group, spiritual sanctuaries, and traditionally protected areas to safeguard biodiversity, to preserve cultural heritage, and to maintain sacred connection to the land. These areas serve as a refuge for endangered species, genetic reservoir for native flora and fauna, and sites for cultural ceremonies, cultural rituals, and spiritual renewal. Fifth important area is seed sovereignty and crop diversity. Indigenous farmers preserve and cultivate a diverse array of traditional crop varieties known as land races or heirloom seeds, which contribute to agricultural biodiversity and food security. Seed saving practices, community seed bank, and decentralized seed exchange networks ensure the conservation of crop genetic diversity and promote resilience to pest, disease, and climate variability. Sixth important point is ecosystem restoration and regeneration. Indigenous community engage in ecosystem restoration and regeneration effort to rehabilitate degraded land, restore habitat connectivity, and revitalize ecosystem. So traditional ecological restoration techniques such as agroforestry, riparian zone restoration, and wetland rehabilitation. This enhance ecosystem services, mitigate soil erosion, and promote biodiversity recovery. Now, the last important point is the legal recognition and indigenous rights. It is very important to have a clear-cut idea about the legal recognition. So, recognizing and respecting indigenous land rights, territorial sovereignty, and customary resource management practices are essential for biodiversity conservation. There is a need for legal framework that support indigenous land tenure, self-governance, and co-management of natural resource empower indigenous community to protect biodiversity, ensure conservation law, and advocate for sustainable development that respect indigenous rights and values. So we have seen that whenever we discuss about the contribution of indigenous knowledge system to biodiversity, we have to see from all these key contributing factors, because this will increase your horizon of understanding. This will increase the different dimension of understanding the role and responsibility of indigenous knowledge. We all know that the indigenous knowledge, the Bharatiya Gyan, or the Gyan, the knowledge of our traditional peoples, our traditional system is so diverse, so broad that we fail to recognize it. It is sad that many Western world, they have given a special preference to all this knowledge system, but suddenly we never think in that manner. This is the real era. This is the time. This is the era of globalization when we have to think the importance of our own homemade घर बैठे घर की चीजों का value. So today we highlighted the key issues of traditional ecological knowledge, sustainable resource management practices, community-based conservation initiative, sacred group and traditional protected areas, seed sovereignty and crop diversity, ecosystem restoration and regeneration, and legal recognition of indigenous rights. Overall, we may say that the contribution of indigenous knowledge system to biodiversity conservation underscores the importance of indigenous stewardship, cultural diversity, and traditional ecological wisdom in achieving conservation goal and protecting or promoting sustainable development. We can say that integrating indigenous knowledge with the modern conservation approach can enhance the effectiveness, equality, and resilience of biodiversity conservation effort in diverse landscape and cultural context. So that's all about the today's lecture. So one important point I just want to highlight it over here is that if you really like this video, then subscribe for more important anthropological lecture. Another important point, if you have any doubt, any questions related to either the present lecture or any of the earlier lecture or any area of anthropology, then you can ask through the comment section. At last, I just want to importantly inform you that a new video will come daily around 1 p.m. So please keep your notification bell on. That's all for today. Thank you so much. Namaste.